probably start with is some basic introductions. How about that, huh? So, hi, my name is Dr. Tyrone Wells Jr. You guys can just call me Ty. And I'm working on a way to talk to anyone about anything. And what that means basically is that I will take a table and set up at parks, campuses, churches. I've done pet shelters. I've done rallies, political festivals, you name it. And I'll go there and I'll have conversations with people about what they deeply believe is true. And my goal is to try to have conversations about these really sensitive topics with people in a way that doesn't turn the conversation into a debate or, an argument, fist fight, whatever have you. I'm looking into trying to find a really good way to have people critically assess how they arrived at their conclusions without turning anything into a philosophical fight. You can still have those philosophical critical thinking opportunities, but you don't have to do it in an aggressive format. And there's ways that you can do it in a really positive and productive way. And I want to tell you guys about that today. It's easy and it's actually really fun. It's a fun hobby to get into. So before we begin, just big thanks. American Atheist, Jim, Greg, where's all my bros? Chris on the mics, appreciate you, man. And everybody else who helped me get over here, really appreciate it. Jim gave me the Google Maps address to come up here, and when I looked on Google Maps, I was like, show me nearby places, and they said there was an event nearby here. It was like for separation of church and state. It was on the same day. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to totally check that out. But it's at the same time I'm talking, dang it. Oh, they got a guy talking about street epistemology too. That's fantastic. Oh, his name's Tyrone. Oh, it's me. That's fine. So when I say I'm in the right place, I really mean it, and I really appreciate it. Anyway, also, Tri-State Free Thinkers, you guys are great, and I met you guys, a lot of familiar faces that I'm seeing from the last time I was doing talks at the ARC Museum protest. Yeah, in fact, I got to talk to some of you guys here, and just really happy to see you guys again. The way how I turned into an atheist was kind of cool. I was originally very much a Christian believer, very much, deep in the cloth. All the way into my graduate experience, graduate school, where I was going to Georgia Tech as graduating in or getting my degree in biochemistry. I realized that I had a lot of religious answers, but not a lot of religious explanations. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, cool. It's a nice crowd here. But this was the issue for me because I was beginning to like the explanations that I was getting from a secular, not necessarily secular, but a scientific point of view, and I was having a hard time fitting them into my religious perspective. I was trying really hard to figure out how I could stick that how into like my biblical frame, and I couldn't do it. And so I was just like, okay, well then I'll just put the religious point aside and have two basic minds that think about things. I can say science is here and religion's, somewhere else. What really did it for me was when I started meeting other people from different faiths as part of my graduate school experience and starting to get exposed to different kinds of new perspectives, new people, new religious ideas. And I'm realizing a lot of people are confident about something, but they don't agree with each other, and only one of us can be right. And that's what I'm starting to realize. Not only that, but the answers that I had were no longer satisfactory to the standard of evidence that I now was beginning to develop. And the scientific explanations that I was getting raised or improved my standard of evidence. And so what I was looking for was this brilliant moment where I told all my friends, hey guys, check it out, I'm an atheist. Look, science is best. Isn't this great? No. Didn't work out very well. So what I actually realized I didn't have a good reason to believe in a God anymore, it was a troubling moment because it was a really big realization on my part. Realization that I didn't have a good reason to continue to believe. Not so much that a God didn't exist, but that I couldn't get to that belief via a reliable thinking process. And when I tried to tell my friends that, it really kind of, even in a scientific setting, this is like, again, a scientific lab, a lot of those people had religious beliefs or were spiritual or had some sort of supernatural holding that kind of challenged them when I brought this up to them. And I couldn't no longer have a peaceful conversation with them. In fact, conversations started to turn debates, arguments, and whoever came out of the winner of that, we both kind of lost because there was always that heated environment. And I realized that it wasn't worth the trouble anymore. It wasn't worth the stress to talk to people about what they believed to be true. And it started to make me feel more isolated because I felt like I couldn't get to anybody. My mom was still Christian at the time. My sister was also a Christian. So I had my family that I couldn't talk to, coworkers I couldn't speak with. I was afraid to bring it up to my friends. And I started to feel like there was this invisible wall that separated me from all the other people that I cared about, my friends, my family, coworkers, people I respected. And I didn't know what to do. I had an issue that I needed to connect with people, but I couldn't have a way, that I didn't know a way to do that. And so what I'm here today to do, and I know this is a long time for the cell, but what I want to do is show you a really cool technique that I found to talk to people that helped me get out of a hard situation when I was an atheist, particularly after I just transitioned, that I think would be really helpful for you too, and help you make those connections with other people as well. Anyway, so method's called street epistemology. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is what is street epistemology, or SE, why use SE, why empower yourself with this conversational technique that allows you to be able to talk to people, again, without making debates and arguments, but let them critically assess how they actually reach their conclusions. And then finally, we're going to talk about how SE works. And it's really, really simple. You don't need microphones, you don't need a camera. You don't even need duct tape on pedestals. You can do this, and it's easy and it's fun. So what is SE? When I first saw this word, or when I first saw this term, I was like, okay, well, the thing that's sticking out to me the most is this bottom word right here, epistemology. I mean, what's going on there? I don't know, special club, moonspeak, what's going on? Turns out it's just a fancy word for basically the study of how we've come to learn things, or how do we figure out stuff that we believe is true. And the street part is just a reference to informally asking someone like how they figure that out. You don't need to wear a tie, there's no suit. Like when I'm doing my stuff, I'll go out to a park, run some laps, and then set up afterwards. And I'm like sweaty, the people I'm talking to are sweaty, and we're just having a fun conversation. And what we're trying to do is basically combined, find a informal way to talk to people about what they believe is true or how they reach their conclusions. Questions in street epistemology look kind of like this. How did you figure that out? What's a good way to reach that conclusion? Is that method reliable? How can we test that? These are all fantastic questions to ask. And what they begin to do is start to make the person that you're talking to feel invited into a conversation where they can start to critically assess how they arrived at their conclusions. And it's not so much you can't change a person's mind, but you can empower them to do so when you give them the opportunity to. And it turns out a lot of the people who have these really deeply held beliefs never had the opportunity to question how they arrived at their beliefs. And if you do that, you can do some really amazing things in very, very short periods of time. Let's see, why use SE? Why have this chance where you can allow people to think about how they arrived at their conclusions, and did they use a reliable way to get there? Well, for one, it's an unbiased approach. SE doesn't have an ideology behind it. It's not a tool for atheists. It's not a tool for any kind of religion out there. It doesn't pick sides. It's a fair approach to try to get two people to really come to terms with how they understand what things are true and what things aren't true. And it's always good to ask questions. It's an unbiased approach, as I said, always good to ask questions. And it can work for any belief. The longest talk I've had was a 5-hour conversation at a park that ranked the worst and best Marvel movies that had come out over the last 7 years. And I only lasted long because I'm very passionate about it, but we came up with a definitive list. I'm actually really proud about it. The other guy, complete stranger, went from 5:35 p.m. to like 10:35 p.m. When we left, he was like, I feel like I'll never see you again. We became really good friends in that short moment. But from that to, hey, I believe in a God. I believe most hardcore things would be like, hey, I don't believe transgenders are a real thing, or I believe God's true, or I believe, very, very controversial political topics, very controversial beliefs. You can get through all of them with this really cool unbiased approach. Let's look at this other point. SE works really great. One-on-one, one on a large group of people. You could have even SE done on yourself by yourself. I use SE to self-examine beliefs that I have that I may not necessarily be as confident in, or that I might be absolutely confident about. And I found that it's a very good way just to assess if I'm using a good way to get to that conclusion, and is that route reliable or not. And then, of course, my favorite part, it avoids drama. I am not a fan of drama. I am anti-drama as it gets. And I found that SE is a very good way to have productive and positive conversations with people, particularly about religion. And we know that there's a lot of examples where we don't necessarily have the best street cred of having those. I love to show some examples of what conversations look like, typically, like on YouTube when I searched atheist, theist conversation. It kind of looked a little bit something like this.
I'd be a lot freer if people like you were put in prison as retaliation for the collective crime of racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, and homophobia.
God blesses me.
You're judgmental.
How do you deal with sin in your life?
Perpetrate this every day by telling people what their rights are and what they aren't.
It's people like you that ruin this world.
You're judgmental.
Christians are responsible for slavery.
Do you know why you're getting upset about it?
I'm getting upset because you are stepping on the rights of thousands of
this is a
Americans.
freedom to me.
You're judgmental.
You are lost in a fantasy.
Yes.
Okay?
Mission to preach the word.
Preach what? That gay people can't
Sir,
love
you
who
can't
they like to
spit on.
love?
You can't spit on me, sir.
can't-
Well, I know this. I could look at that sun. I could look at the sky. I could see the trees, and I know there is life. So if there is life, there has to be a creator of life.
No,
Yes.
there doesn't.
Absolutely. All you have to do is provide evidence. Can you provide evidence? I'm about to. Okay, provide the evidence. Evidence. The Bible's got evidence. The Bible's a book of evidence.
Who caused God?
Listen,
that's the key point. I can trap
well,
you.
I know,
Ray,
I know
can
what
trap
you're
you
saying.
every time.
But the
of
law,
course, you know what I'm saying.
But
and your arrogance as a Christian.
Yeah,
you know that.
how
old are you? You don't have to believe it if you don't know it. If you don't know it, then think about it. Do you think God gave you a brain?
Again, how do you deal with you breaking the law of God? How do you deal with that?
How do you deal with this delusion of yours that there's some invisible man in the sky sitting on a
Well, it's
cloud
not just
throwing down
that.
bolts
So
of
you don't
lightning?
believe that Jesus walked the earth?
No!
Christians are responsible for slavery.
Absolutely. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Mock your religion into extinction. That's exactly where it should be.
There's no way you're going to be able to do that.
It's already happening. It's already happening. So you have.
It's not a fairy tale
It's a
because
fairy tale.
You know,
I'm a born-again Christian.
Oh, born again.
Baptized in Jesus' name,
who?
filled with the Holy
Jesus
Ghost.
who?
It's God who works in
Jesus
me.
who?
It's our false law. It's not true.
Give me a hearing.
It is
Give
wrong.
me.
Didn't your parents teach you math?
Is he right next to you, or are you holding his hand?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you need some medication, my friend.
Hitler.
Who designed God? You're caught in a trap now. It's a logical trap where you listen.
I'm the ignorant one. I use reason and logic.
The Bible is no more proof than God exists, than a comic book is no more proof than Superman exists.
You are sick. You're a sick person.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're judgmental.
It's not going to be a two-way conversation. There's no point. Bye. Bye.
Atheism forever.
What is interesting here actually is that we've got people from different faiths and who all believe in some kind of heaven in a different sense. But every single one of them believes in this heaven on the basis of faith. And faith, by definition, is believing in things without evidence. And personally, I don't do that because I'm not an idiot.
So whenever I show that video, I'm always like in the back of the room just crossing my fingers hoping that you guys laugh at it. Because that means we kind of probably see some of ourselves in there. I know I do, especially like 3, 4-ish years ago. I've done that before. I've looked at people and said, I caught you in a logical trap. Don't you feel bad? It doesn't have any effect. Why? Like, right? What I want to do is show you guys what SE looks like, what some examples are. And there's people doing this all around the world. This is my friend Reed Nicewonder and myself. Cut together some clips of us doing a variety of different talks with various people. I want to highlight the change in the tone and the degree of productiveness that you might notice.
Yeah, so just have this hobby where I chat with people about anything. Is there a particular belief you want to chat about?
Is there what?
A particular belief that you want to chat about? Something you really think is true?
Christianity.
Yeah. All right, anyway, yeah. Ty is my name. I've got a 5-minute timer. Okay. Belief any two people can talk about anything. Is there anything that strongly motivates you? Anything that you think is true? God?
Yeah.
That's a heavy topic. You want to talk about that for 5 minutes?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, I can talk about, my background is Christianity. I was raised Southern Baptist.
I believe in God, so that would be the thing I'm the most certain about.
Okay.
First, got to get a sense of your confidence that God exists. Say on a scale from 1 to 10.
10 for sure.
10.
The existence of
I
God.
mean, I am 100% certain that higher power exists.
Okay.
95.
95. All right.
Very confident.
From like 0 to 100%.
100%.
100%, you don't need any more evidence. You're absolutely closed on the position. You think that's absolutely true?
Yep.
Okay, 100%. What got you to that 100%?
Really, well,
So I go to a Christian school, and I've taken a bunch of classes on theories and all these different things, and it just makes sense to me. It kind of like hits home.
And for me, it's just a meditation thing that I realize that it's just a full-on total goodness of the earth, all the plant.
I believe that there is something that is been working on my behalf in this universe.
Whatever is here had to come from somewhere.
Okay.
It's hard to imagine coming from somewhere without some sort of first cause.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's hard to think that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. How does something making sense to you relate to the actual truth of it? So, like, could someone actually be mistaken about a belief that makes sense to them?
Yeah, I think they could.
Okay.
That is a very good point. I would say,
So that's an interesting perspective. So you believe that? Wow, I've never ever heard that before.
Well, that's an interesting. You know, we've come around to an interesting point that I never verbalized to myself before, but I do see that, I'm starting to see just from this discussion.
And the benefits I get from it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective.
I would like to believe it if it's true.
Right, but because nobody can question it, nobody can prove it. You can't prove faith. You can't prove any of these things. It's like, why am I believing this? You may be onto something, man.
Yeah, so
that's powerful stuff, man.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just stuff to think about, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. That's really enlightening. I never thought about it like that.
That's true.
Right.
That's a good way to look at it.
I like to think about it that way. And that, if anything, that puts you in a more reasonable position.
Well, thanks.
Yeah?
All right.
Cool.
Have a good evening. It was
You
good
too.
chatting with you.
Good chatting with you as well.
All right. Have a good evening.
Have a good one.
Do you guys see any difference between those two kinds of videos? What stands out the most? I'm always interested. Don't be shy, come on.
Well, I mean, if you're just shouting your beliefs at someone, it's more likely that they'll just dig their heels deeper.
Absolutely.
Because you're giving the impression that you're not listening.
Exactly.
When people feel that you're not listening, how could they not put their heels deeper?
Listening is like the biggest thing. Yes, it is. But it's so important if you want the person to at least be able to consider why they think. Because sometimes people will say stuff, but they never process it, and they need to have someone stand in front of them and will be like, and then they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say, what are these words that are coming out of my mouth? It's a really, really cool thing to just be able to listen to someone, maybe even rephrase back the things that they've said, and give them a chance for them to process what they've been saying with their mouth, with their ears, and see, is that really what it sounds like? Is that really what my beliefs are? Let's actually get into how SCE can work for you guys. So how does SCE work? The way how I see it, there's a lot of different kind of models for this. This is my personal model. This is the way I've made sense of it. But there's the person, the method, and the conclusion. The person is the people that we're talking to. The conclusions are maybe the God belief that they have. But the method is the thing that connects those two. It's the through line. And the way how I see this isn't so much in a straight line, but actually a curve like this. And I know it's like this because people tend to closely identify with their conclusions, almost to the point where they will identify with their conclusion. You'll hear that when you see people say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a Baptist, I'm an atheist. It goes both ways. But because they invest so much in themselves and their conclusions, they basically become one and the same. And when you ask or question the conclusions, you'll get responses as if you had targeted the person specifically. It's very, very similar. You get that kind of backfire effect. What's available to question or target is the methodology that they use to reach their conclusion. The methodology has very little ego invested in it. And as mentioned, not many people invest a lot of time examining how they got to their conclusions. And when you ask questions about the method, how the person reached their conclusion, one of two things will happen. One, they'll either get a better method to get to their conclusion. And as atheists, I think we should be totally open to that concept, that people are getting better methods to reach their God belief. Even if we don't necessarily agree, they are getting better at finding better, more verifiable, testable ways to reach their conclusion. I think we should be open to that. As an alternative, they drop the method completely, and now there's nothing connecting the person to the conclusion anymore. And then what you end up with is a person that no longer has an ability to reach that conclusion anymore. They are now a person that's still very much, happy. They can be believing in most things that they had before, but now they have a higher standard of evidence, and they're working to try to figure out what can meet that, and won't accept for anything less. Let's look at some examples of questions that target like the person, the method, and the conclusion. This is Tim. He was one of the first people I spoke to when I was doing my SE talks. He believed in a God very much so. The reason why he believed in a God was because of his personal experiences. He says, I know my God is real because I had this very personal dream that was really true to me. And I felt like God was talking to me one-on-one, and I know it's so real. And if you never experienced that, you'll never know what that's like. I'm like, okay, that's cool. There are a lot of different ways you can tackle that. And you've probably heard personal experiences before if you've been talking to people. What does questions look like if you target the person? Remember, we don't want to target the person. So these are examples of, common pratfalls. But if I were to target the person with my question, I'd be like, well, your personal experiences doesn't make your God real. That's a common response that I used to give. The reason why it doesn't work is it doesn't really extend the conversation much. Another example is, hey, people say that all the time. What makes you any different? Like personal experiences for Hindus, like what's the difference there? It's a judgment that the person who you're talking to is going to see or feel or react to as if you're challenging them, and they're going to close up. They're not going to have that opportunity to critically assess how they came to their conclusion if they feel like they've been challenged. Another example is, you're not making any sense, from like a top of a mountain, just echoed. Doesn't do a lot of work either. Okay, so what if you were to target the conclusion, for example? By targeting the conclusion, you could say, hey, that's not good evidence. Your personal experiences, that isn't really reputable, good ways to figure out that. It's true, and I agree with that point, but it's not a good way to get that person to critically assess how they came to the conclusion. Remember, SE is not about changing someone's mind, it's about giving them the opportunity to do that themselves. And the way you do that is by opening up the conversation, peeling back layers of how they believe, and trying to figure out, can I give you an opportunity to think about how you came to this conclusion? And can we assess together if this method's reliable or not? You can't do that if you target their conclusion, because they'll treat that as a personal attack. Another example is, well, I don't believe that, but I respect it, but, we can both go our own ways. Like, well, that's fine. Again, it could be seen as another judgment. What you're trying to do is, again, be open and make comments that are like an open door, things that continue a conversation and extend the amount of time that they'll have to be able to critically assess how they got to their conclusion. And of course you can say, hey, that doesn't make any sense. Again, it doesn't really get anywhere. So what does it look like when we target the method? If we were to target the method, if someone said, hey, I know my God is real because of personal experiences, you say, hey, could that method ever lead someone to a false conclusion? That's a fantastic question. Because now we're not targeting the person themselves, we're not targeting their conclusion, we're asking them, what is that method that you're using to reach your conclusion? And can it ever lead you to a wrong one? And if it can lead you to wrong ones, are we really justified in being so confident in this method that can potentially lead you to a wrong conclusion? Do other people use personal experiences and always get to right conclusions? What do we really know about this method, and can we verify how reliable it is together? That's an open thing that both of you guys can work on. Another example is, hey, is there a better way to reach that conclusion than personal experience? Get them thinking about alternative methods to get to the same conclusion, and if there's better ones out there, maybe they'll drop the bad ones. Here's another one. Would different personal experiences affect your belief? I love this one, because if they say that no matter what the different personal experiences or the different things that they claim that they rest their belief on, if we change that and they would still believe it at the same exact level, that's not the foundation of their belief. They're just saying it, but it's not really what they're resting their belief on. And what you're trying to do is peel back the layers and figure out what is that foundational belief. So if they say, hey, if I had a completely different set of personal beliefs, I'd still believe in this God. It's like, okay, so clearly, whether we keep them the same or change them, it's not the personal beliefs that's keeping you to this God conclusion. What's really getting you to that method? What's really what's really justifying that level of confidence that you have? So they might, if you're open about this, will change, the dynamic of what they're talking about. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's not personal experience, but I know my God is real because of science, right? There's a lot of science that backs up my God. And when I hear things like this, there's alternative things that you could do. One thing that I like to do is just rephrase back the exact same thing I heard from them. I'll ask them like, hey, what do you mean by that? Or really, I'll just be like, hey, you think so it sounded like to me you just said that your God, your God was real because of science. And a lot of times, they'll come back at you and be like, no, that's not what I said. I meant there's a lot of scientists that believe in my God. And that is a completely different claim. And that's a different route that you would go through. But I like to ask clarification questions when I get to this point. Clarification questions, what do they look like? Hey, what do you mean by that? Oh, science? Well, could you elaborate? How'd you figure that out? Or could you mind telling me a little bit more about that? Get them talking about it. Let them start to process what they actually mean when they say these, hot word topics. Do they really know what they're referencing? Do they want to have an opportunity to actually explain it to another person? And is science a reliable way to test the supernatural? A lot of times I'll ask them if they give me a God belief. We'll try to define what God they're talking about as best as we can. Like, what kind of sect of Christianity are you, or what kind of sect of religion are you? What kind of aspects of this God are we talking about? And does it seem like this God's supernatural? Yes, this God's very supernatural. He writes every law of physics known to existence. I'm like, great. Is science a really good way to test if a supernatural thing exists? Like, what kind of tests do we have in science that can test supernatural things? And if they give you an answer, that might be right. Hey, you got to be open to that, because, you guys can write a paper. You can get a Nobel Prize for that, right? But in the event that they can't, they'll realize that on their own accord. And what you can ask overall is, hey, if science is limited, what's the real foundation of this belief? Are you really using science to get to this foundation? Or is there something else that's getting you there? Oftentimes they'll rephrase again. And this is when you start to get the foundational levels. When you get to the foundation, you'll start hearing phrases like, I couldn't come to this belief without X, or my confidence would drop if I didn't have this thing, or without faith, I couldn't believe in God. Faith tends to be a common foundation. When you reach this level of questioning, when you just reach the point where they say, okay, this is in fact the thing that would change my mind if it turned out not to be true or not reliable, try to understand what they're talking about. Don't rush. Ask them, what do you mean by faith? I have an idea of what faith is, but they might have a different one. And if we're using different definitions for the same vocabulary, we're going to be talking past each other. So try to figure out what they mean by it. A lot of times when they just try to define the foundation themselves, they'll realize they may not have put as much thought into it. And they might give you a definition where it's just like, is that really what you think it is? It's like, let me think about that again. But is faith a reliable way to reach a true conclusion if they give you a definition for it? And like sometimes I've been told, well, it's just trusting no matter what. Is trusting no matter what a reliable way to come to a true conclusion? Is that a good way to reach a true conclusion? It's a simple question, and it can have a really powerful effect on the people that you're talking to. Then they start to assess, hey, maybe it does. Maybe it could get you to a true conclusion. Do different people use faith and come to different God's beliefs? Can I use faith to believe that there's no God? If I believe that there's no God using faith and someone believes in God using faith, could we both be right? If we're both using faith to get to that conclusion and we can't both be right, is faith a really good method to come to a true conclusion? There's like very, very, very simple questions that you can ask that help them assess whether or not that foundational belief that they have is reliable, or that methodology that they have is worth having. Are there more reliable ways than faith? Can we still reach that conclusion? Like, I'm not saying it's wrong, but can we just find a reliable way to get there? Because that's really what we're trying to look for. Good ways or good reasons to believe in things. And do you have one? And can we explore it if you have it? And if you don't, Maybe there's a better answer out there that's more intellectually honest. Maybe I don't know might be the best answer out of everything. When you ask these kinds of questions, typically they end on really positive notes around the lines of like, hey, you'll get comments like, oh man, I'm really thinking, that was really, really great. I'm thinking. Or, hey, that's a really interesting point. I'm going to have to really think about that. Or I might need to get back to you because I've never really thought about this kind of stuff before. Or you might get one of the best answers, in my opinion. I don't know. In my opinion, I don't know is not only just a thing that you could say or an out, it's the best answer you can offer when you don't have conclusive information to determine if something's true or not. And if you can get if you get to the point where someone can realize that they don't know on a deeply held belief that they have that might be supernatural based or based in like a God belief that's unattainable by, reliable methodologies, that's a great conclusion to just say, hey, think about it. And if you do figure out something really awesome, I'm willing to continue this conversation with you. And a lot of people end on that note very happy with the recognition that they may not have the best methodology before, but are more accepting of the concept that they may not know, and it's okay. Because a lot of times they're raised in an environment where saying I don't know isn't a good thing. Anyway, so let's see. I want to show an example of a conversation that I had more or less in full. This is Jacob. I met him when I was running around in Lexington. There's a place called the Arboretum. It's a running track. And after I did my run, sat down, set up the table, and Jacob was like, hey, what's going on? I was like, hey, I do 5-minute chats. You want to hang out? And he said, yeah. And it was a really cool conversation. I'll show you guys.
That should be flashing. So hi, I'm Ty.
I'm Jacob. Nice to meet you.
So I got a hobby where I set up a table and talk to people about whatever they want to talk about. I think it's really cool to show that, any two people can talk about anything, regardless of the color, whatever. Big size, how rich they look, doesn't matter. Normally the conversations that we have are really cool when they're centered around what someone really strongly believes or a philosophy they have or something they wrap their lives around. If you don't want to talk about that, we can talk about Marvel movies or your favorite junk food.
All right.
But is there anything that you really strongly believe is true or something you're confident about? Can I also fist bump you and ask you your name again?
Oh, yeah, Jacob.
Jacob, I'm Ty.
Jacob. That's a big question. Wow. Well, I'd say I'm a Christian, so that's probably my biggest belief.
There are a lot of beliefs in Christianity.
yeah, you're right.
Would you just say like the Christian God exists, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe in one God and that his
this is a really heavy topic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
They're in middle school class, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
How confident are you that Jesus and God exist? All right.
I'd say 100%.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm going to define 100% and just let me know because it's a number, and and you can change the number. I don't care, but 100% to me is like
no doubt.
No doubt. There's no way I can be wrong. I'm not asking questions anymore. I'm certain, closed-minded on the position. I'm closed on the position. 100%.
Let's go 98%.
98%.
Yeah. Everybody has those periods of doubt, right?
I think so, and I think it's actually healthier to not be absolute about what you believe. What got you to the 98% confidence on this God and Jesus? I'm just going to combine them both.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or like on the existence of the Christian God.
So I'm actually a medical student, and I found a big interest in biology when I was in high school. There's like one big hypothesis out there called the RNA hypothesis.
RNA world theory?
Yeah. And that because RNA can act as like a catalyst and also as a way to store information, biological information, that might have been what was initially used as protein and DNA.
Right.
But like when do you know the Stanley Miller experiments?
Yes.
Yeah. So they show that if you put like
RNA in one tube and make it rapidly produce itself, it can make like little tiny monsters of itself. Or like simplified versions of RNA.
The one I'm thinking of is that they put a whole bunch of
nucleotides. Sorry if I'm interrupting.
Well, you're fine. I'm just. It's been a while since I've read it. So like they tried to recreate the oceans of the Earth in like this small environment, and then they would like zap it with electricity.
Sure.
To kind of simulate the environment and atmosphere of the Earth 4 million years ago.
Right.
And they showed that they can actually make some molecules that are essential to life. Some amino acids,
right?
And like urea, formaldehyde, stuff like that. However, the amino acids that they make are only like glycine and very simple non-polar amino acids. So they haven't shown that they can create more of the complex amino acids that are needed to sustain life. And they also never showed that they could create DNA or RNA.
Can I ask you, how does this get you to the God belief? Like, how does
so
these experiments lead you to the 98% confidence in God?
I don't see a way of life spontaneously generating. And I don't see a way if you were to talk to my astrophysics pal.
Sure.
And if you talk to him, I cannot see a way of the world or the universe spontaneously.
Jacob, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm wondering. So you have this theory that's presented in a scientific model, and it sounds incredible. And you say I can't see how that's feasible yet. Therefore, this completely other thing. How is that your foundation? How did that become the
I wouldn't say that's my foundation. That's just like part of.
Or how does this being hard to believe make this 98% confident? Like how?
Oh, okay.
How did that become the alternative at a 98% confidence level? Like, was that the reason why you're 98%?
I think that's just part of it, and I think if you look into other parts of my faith, so like. It's kind of hard to explain, and it's kind of all feeling, right, from a skeptic's point of view. There are some things in your life that you just you have a gut instinct.
Gut instinct?
That you know it's true.
Are gut instincts ever wrong?
Oh, all the time.
If they can be wrong all the time, does it justify supporting a 98% confidence?
From a logical standpoint, no.
What is getting you to that 98%?
I'd say so a belief in certain things in the Bible. So one of the big arguments in apologetics is, why would 12 people who followed Jesus around, heard what he said, and then saw him die, lie about him coming back to life only to know that they were going to be persecuted and put to death for saying that. Like,
does that get you to the 98%?
That's kind of like the main thing. It's like the biology aspect, and then that as well.
I'm just going to test if that is actually your main thing. I'm going to ask you a question. If it turned out, this is kind of weird, and
no, go ahead.
Again, I'm just stimulating conversation.
Yeah.
If it turned out that there was substantial evidence to a criteria of your satisfaction that they were in fact lying, would that reduce your confidence from 98% down to like maybe 70, maybe lower than that?
Probably.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Say I had I don't know. I have a cat. I do have a cat. And he's a really cute cat. His name's Vinny.
Vinny.
And I walk him on a leash, and he's a black cat, and he's super, super
cool.
You
walk your cat on a leash?
I walk my So listen, I used to work overseas for a while.
Okay.
It's very common over there. In Sweden, everyone's walking their cats around. In America, they keep them locked up indoors. And I'm like, that cat wants to be outside. That's why he's in the window. And if you leash train them really young, they're super, super cool about it. But it's not so much the leash training. It's just, would you believe me if I told you I had a cat and I showed you a picture of the cat and like I'm holding the cat? Like
Yeah.
Okay. If I told you I actually have a tiger and his name is Marshall and he's a full-blown Bengal tiger and I have a picture of him and it's me and the tiger, would you believe I have a tiger then?
It'd be tougher. It'd be harder.
It would be harder to believe.
Yeah.
If I told you I had a purple dragon from Jupiter that came and visits me in a time machine, and I had a picture of the purple dragon and there's like a DeLorean in the background, and it's the same picture, would you believe that?
I'd say it's photoshopped.
It seems like the more incredible the claim, the better the standard of evidence, or the standard of evidence improves. Would you say that God is more incredible than a purple dragon from Jupiter?
I would, yeah.
So the thing isn't so much that I think the apologist angle is, hey, what's the likelihood of these 12 people lying? It's like, maybe it's not even that they're lying, it's just that that's a really low bar of evidence. It's basically 12 people saying, Tyrone has a cat, you believe that.
Yeah.
Tyrone has a tiger, 12 people said that. Maybe you'd believe it, maybe not. 12 people told you, hey, Tyrone has a purple dragon from Jupiter. It's like, I'm not believing that. Like, you need more evidence to support that with. What if What if it is a case of not so much that they might be lying, but that's just may not be enough evidence to reach that conclusion as a definitive claim, or at least a 98% certainty, that a God exists, since it's way more incredible than Purple Dragon? What do you think about that?
All right, can you restate that question?
Yeah, it's kind of a long question.
Yeah.
Do you have enough evidence to justify 98% confidence in God? And if it's not on that 12 apostles story, what else is getting you to that level?
What else? I'd say I can't answer that just right now.
I'm totally fine with that. Can I throw one last
Oh,
thing
yeah,
in?
go ahead.
If I had a coin, it's a quarter. It's not a trick coin. If I flip it and I catch it, put it on the back of my hand, I don't know if it's heads or tails. Do you know if it's heads or tails?
No.
That's the best answer.
Yeah.
Until we have better evidence. Jacob.
All right.
Wonderful talking to you.
Nice talking to you. That was really cool.
Guys, we're in the summary. I remember when I was in church and the pastor would be like, in summary, and I'd get off that pew. I'd be like, yeah, let's go. I still got those vibes in me. Anyway, you guys are awesome. I just want to let you know, hey, there is a bunch of people around the world who are doing these kinds of talks. On my YouTube channel alone, I have done one video every week. There's 54 examples of guys who have those kinds of positive talk with me, who come with me with a really hardcore religious belief or a belief that's in the supernatural realm, and we have a very short conversation. By the end, they're happy. They had a chance to think about how they arrived at their conclusion. They realize that may not have the best reasons, and they're more likely to say, hey, I don't know, or I'm gonna think about that, or you gave me an opportunity to really think about something I never really had a chance to. My entire life I've been looking for a way to talk to people about things like this. And this gone, even when I was a Christian, I still had questions, but I didn't really have explanations. And so what I'm trying to do is show you guys a cool method that anybody can do. If you just ask questions that are focused on the methodology of how people arrive at their beliefs, you don't need a camera, you don't need a microphone. You can have these really engaging conversations that invite people to critically think about how they got to their conclusions. There's a quote on Facebook. There are a lot of quotes on Facebook, but there was one that I found kind of meaningful way back when. It was something like, the 3 things that you can't talk about in public are like money, politics, and religion. Not so much that they're taboo, but because we just don't have a method to talk about those things in a productive way. And for a long time, I used to believe in that. But I don't anymore because I think we now have that kind of method. I think we figured out the secret. And I think there's a really cool way to have these conversations with people that don't get the person challenged. Keeps them not feeling that they have to be on the defensive end, and can actually get through to them in a really short time frame and allow them to critically assess how they arrived at the conclusion and if they used a reliable way to get there. My name's Tyrone Wells Jr., and I'm working on a way to talk with anyone about anything. And I think you guys can too. I think we all can. Thank you.
Yes, I understand that my whole life is just a blink of an eye. The history of the earth is with each moment that goes by. But this moment that I'm with you, it feels like time has stood still. It feels somehow like it matters, and that it always will. Thank you so much.